It is 2:03, and I would like to call this meeting to order. May I please have a roll call?
Yes, Madam Chair. Commissioner Anna Hamilton.
Here.
Commissioner Hank Hughes.
Here.
Commissioner Justin Green.
Here.
Commissioner Camila Bustamante.
Present.
Chair Anna Hansen.
Present.
All-
Thank you. I would like to also recognize that it's International Women's Day, so just to note that. And then I will go to the approval of the agenda. So is there any changes from staff? What's the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Green, second by Commissioner Hughes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Item 2, FY 2024 Congressional Direct Spending, presentation and discussion of proposed projects for FY 2024 Congressional Direct Spending requests. Growth Management, Robert Griego. Welcome, Robert.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Robert Griego, Planning Manager. This item in front of you today for this special meeting is to discuss proposed projects for the FY24 congressionally directed spending requests. This request included in your packet is a background memo, which I'll go over, and we will discuss potential projects and go back to the board for a request for direction on moving these forward. U.S. Senator Ben Ray Lujan, Senator Martin Heinrich, and Representative Teresa Leger Fernandez have issued a call for applications for congressionally directed spending and community project funding for fiscal year 2024. These projects support community priorities for federal funding and is a critical tool for local government and nonprofit organizations in New Mexico to voice their priorities to the federal government. Staff is requesting that the Board of County Commission approval of projects for which CDS and CPF applications should be submitted. The congressionally designated spending is not an open-ended capital outlay request. Instead, the CDS CPF projects are limited to specific federal agency accounts. This means that the project still must meet the eligibility, matching, and other requirements of the account. The CDS CPF process is competitive since the Senate limits the funding available for CDS projects, and the House of Representatives limits the number of CPF requests per representative to 15. Finally, the respective Appropriations Committee actually chooses the projects to fund. In the past 2 years, the county has submitted project applications through congressionally designated spending for various road, facility, water, and wastewater projects. Projects were identified through a subcommittee of the Capital Planning Committee, which includes Public Works, Roads, Utilities, Facilities, Growth Management, Planning, the Housing Authority, Community Development Department, and Community Managers and the County Manager's Office, which reviewed existing capital project requests and selected possible projects for consideration. For FY 2022, the County Housing Authority received a grant award in the amount of $1,044,172 for re-roofing repairs at Housing Authority sites through Congresswoman Teresa Leger Fernandez. For FY 2023, the County Housing Authority received a grant award letter from HUD on March 2nd, which awarded a total last week, which awarded a total of $1,212,000 for the Restucco facilities project. So we have been successful over the last couple of years in receiving awards. The funding agencies, the list of eligible funding agencies and accounts for congressionally directed spending includes the following agencies: the Agriculture, Rural Department, Agriculture, Rural Development and related agencies, Commerce, Justice and Science, Energy and Water Development, Financial Services and General Government, Homeland Security, Interior, Environment and related agencies, Labor, Health and Human Services, Education and related agencies, Military, Veterans Affairs and related agencies, Transportation, HUD, Housing and Urban Development and related agencies. For each of the different funding mechanisms, there is a requirement for community support. Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez has informed constituents that specifically members must demonstrate that there is significant community support for the proposed projects. This demonstration is critical to increasing the likelihood that the Appropriations Committee will choose to fund a project. Support may be evidenced by, but not limited to, the following: letters of support from elected officials and other state agencies and other local and state agencies, press articles or newspaper editorials highlighting the need for the requested CPF, listing on state and intended use plans, community development plans or other publicly available planning documents, and resolutions passed by city councils or boards. In addition, the congressionally designated spending criteria requires projects to demonstrate significant community support through at least 2 letters of support from third parties within the community that would benefit from fulfillment of the request. These letters must clearly communicate the benefits that the request would confer upon the community. In regard to the staff process, the county staff evaluation criteria began while the board approved Resolution 2023-09, which adopted the FY 24 to 28 ICIP. Staff reviewed the ICIP to identify projects that may be eligible for CDS, CPS funding, as well as another significant project that will soon be presented to the board for action, which is a county public safety radio project. Staff also applied the following general criteria to evaluate project options. Generally, avoid duplicate requests to the New Mexico Legislature and U.S. Congress for the same project to the extent possible. Be respectful that our federal delegation has shown interest in our public housing sites previously. Avoid projects with significant contingencies beyond the county's control. Avoid projects for which there are other significant funding opportunities. And pursue projects that relate to emergency preparedness, training, response, or rehabilitation. Although not currently on the ICIP, the county's public safety road project has been in development for years. It's a mission-critical public safety project that will either upgrade the county's land mobile radio system or allow the county to join the digital trunked radio system, DTRS, that is owned and operated by the Department of Information Technology, DOIT. The amount included in the project column cost below is the lower of the 2 alternatives that will be presented to the board. Inclusion of the project does not commit the county to any alternative, but it may potentially secure partial funding for a very expensive and necessary project. The applications for the CDS CPF funding includes the following. March 10th, 2023, Senator Heinrich. March 12th, 2023, Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez. And March 16th, 2023, Senator Lujan. Staff intends to submit duplicate applications with all 3 members of our federal delegation, since our understanding is that they do coordinate and have different funding priorities. And the guidelines that staff has reviewed has also indicated that the delegation is requesting that the projects be prioritized for funding. And I'm not sure, Daniel, if you could bring up Exhibit B, that would kind of make that a little bit bigger. Daniel is bringing up the projects, the recommended projects, which is in your packet, and it is on Exhibit B. So the first project is Santa Fe public housing upgrades for electrical panels for 3 Santa Fe County public housing sites. The three sites include the Camino de Jacobo, Santa Cruz, and Via Vista. The project description is exterior and interior electrical system upgrade of service panels and breaker box for 186 units within these three public housing sites at $6,000 per unit. Again, these projects with the housing upgrades have been successful in the past. They've been very specific in the requests that we have received. The category that's identified for this funding source includes the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Economic Development Initiative. The average award for this category, according to the guidelines, is $1.5 million. I think I'm not. The next project that we have identified for recommended project is La Puebla Station 1 burn building. That project cost is $280,000. This project is to place a training tower at La Puebla Station 1, which will make it easier to provide necessary training to district members in the area. The project consists of site preparation, which includes leveling, dirt removal, placement of gravel, as well as the pouring of concrete footings in the foundation. A pre-designed and fabricated burn structure will then be assembled on site by the vendor. The prefabricated structure is estimated to cost $200,000. Site preparation is estimated to cost $50,000. 12% project management is $30,000. Staff describes this as not that this project should not consume significant project management resources, given its relatively simple scope. Again, this category is agriculture and USDA community facilities. And the average amount on within this is just over $1 million is the average award that was previously provided. Finally, the project, the last project is the County Public Safety Radio project. This is a larger project, $7,751,300. This project, the County Public Safety Project, will allow the county to move to a Project 25, P25 digital radio system, the standard for public safety digital radio communications. The P25 system will enhance interoperability with key partner agencies, meet the needs of first responders, is fully supported, and allows for updates to extend the radio communication system's life cycle. The category that we identified for this project would be the Department of Justice, Community-Oriented Policing Services, Law Enforcement, Technology, and Training. Again, staff will, based on the board's direction, staff would further refine the project and the submittal in accordance with the criteria and guidelines for each of these projects. There is our staff available to answer questions specifically about these projects, and I stand for questions from the board.
Thank you, Robert. Questions from the board? Commissioner Hughes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. How much do we expect to get overall? And maybe the best question is, how much did we get last time?
Commissioner, the Housing Authority received an award last week, March 2nd, in the amount of
$1,400,000, I think.
$1,212,000, and this was for the Restucco Facilities project. So it was a very specific project for the Housing Authority, and that was what was received in FY23. That's the grant award letter we received last week. In FY22, there was an award of $1,044,172 for re-roofing repairs at the Housing Authority through Congresswoman Teresa Ledger Fernandez.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just wondering why we're applying for the $7 million project, because it seems to me that wouldn't be very attractive for someone to be only giving a 7th or a 14th of project. But I mean, there must be some logic behind that. Are we hoping to get a little bit to get it started, or why would we? I'm just confused about that one.
I can try to address that, Madam Chair and Commissioner. No, we have no expectation that we're going to receive $7 million from the federal government. At the same time, we did think that it fit along with the burn building into the general topic of emergency preparedness and training of our firefighters in a time of increased demand relative to their services. But with a project of that size, even if we were successful in obtaining, the median grant in that category of $500,000, it's better than a poke in the eye with a stick, as my corporations professor once said. But it helps start to make that a more manageable project. So that was the rationale, though I can obviously understand if the board wanted to be more focused in its request. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Are we thinking then that we'll apply for all three and we hope we get one or two? Is that sort of the idea?
That was our intent. And again, we tried to have a targeted list, but we were going to apply for all three, recognizing that the individual members of our delegation may have different priorities in terms of what they're looking to fund this cycle.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is, were there any runners-up that stand out? I mean, the request says we should pick these three or something else, but I don't know what the something else would be. But are there some runners-up that we want to think about? Or was there nothing else that you really thought worth applying for?
I think if I could, Madam Chair, the other one that received a lot of consideration, but ultimately staff didn't recommend, was the Rio and Medio project, and that was due to the fact that we have a pending duplicate request with the New Mexico legislature that, I think we're optimistic, will be well received. And we weren't confident that if, both requests were met, that we would be able to expend the $2 million. So again, we didn't want to ask for something that we didn't feel we could spend if we hit the lottery, and both requests were funded. I think that was the other one that I recall having discussions about, but Robert obviously could give you insights as to others that maybe were considered but just weren't brought to my attention.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I think there were other projects that were looked at for potential from the ICIP. Again, as we indicated, part of our criteria was not to duplicate, the request or ask for the same funding from the state that we were asking from the federal congressionally directed spending. But there were also some projects that were associated with funding that that is, again, it's eligibility and the requirements. Some of the funding sources go directly to the state as opposed to the county. So we did look at all of the eligible agencies and accounts to try to determine the fits within those. Again, this request in front of you now is specifically to, again, if the board does have additional projects for consideration, we could certainly look and see if they would qualify through the, through the criteria that's been submitted.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Hamilton?
So I guess the question I'll put out there is, have members of our congressional delegation expressed areas that they are focusing on this year, or that Congress, is in a bigger picture focusing on? I mean, in past times and over certain aspects of infrastructure, and certainly since the pandemic, emergency management, emergency response capabilities, community resiliency, which overlaps with that, and can include things like whatever, flood protection, emergency response, all sorts of things. Various things have been emphasized. Recently, given the emphasis on both infrastructure and emergency capabilities, I think it's not a bad selection of projects. And in particular, the burn building and the radio system are really critical to what we do. I mean, like really, you know, there's tremendous immediate value. So unless they've specified, you know, like a few years ago, the state was specifying, this is the year of water, we're funding water projects this year. So yeah, you could go put in for a burn building, but it's like, what part of we're funding water projects didn't you understand, you know? But if our federal delegation hasn't done that, then, you know, maybe we can think about it more broadly. But I think these are really good projects. And, you know, the odd thing about the radio project's a huge project. It's very hard to get it off the ground any other way. So federal funding is one of the places you typically go to get, at least put a chink into the, you know, into the armor of having to consider a project of that magnitude.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton. Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Robert. I have similar concerns about the radio project. I would say that if we got seed money, 10% of it, that is what our expectation would be, but that's not enough to even get us off the ground in this case of $7 million. That's almost something that a bond issue would be, like a county-wide bond issue would go for emergency services, in my humble opinion. The concern also on that is that I actually was speaking with Senator Heinrich's office before this meeting, and they mentioned that seemed like a large ask, and so I think that we're correct in guessing that it is a very large ask for the feds. But it also comes with a time limit. The money comes in about 14 months or so, 15 months, and only has a 1 to 2 year window to spend it. And so if it's something that we get the money and that we don't have the rest of the money to do this project, and we're giving the money back, is that the wrong source of that? And so I think this is a necessary project. I actually love the idea, but I'm just wondering if this is the best use of this request right now. That's more rhetorical than anything, and I would love to hear more about the Rio and Medio project. I think that there's the communities up there, and if there was a fungibility to either do it, because there's 2 projects up in Rio and Medio that they've been talking about. One is for the flood control, and that I think is what's going before the legislature now. So if we could find out whether we have been included for the full funding that we need, or if this could be complementary. Or there's the second project up at Rio and Medio in that corridor, which is adding a road widening and bike lanes and all these sort of recreational access and emergency access route up there. So if we asked for a Rio and Medio-ish project that allowed it to either be working to backfill whatever we went at the legislature, or what we don't receive at the legislature, and then anything extra could then be for the roads project. And then lastly, sorry, I'll leave with the last question is how, if this is a year and a half out, how are we dealing with inflation right now? Are these somewhat inflation-adjusted numbers that allow for a 10 to 15% increase in cost? And should we be asking for 10% more than the current budgeting looks like?
Thank you, Commissioner, Madam Chair, Commissioner Green. I think there was a couple of pieces to that. In regard to, the Rio Medio project, again, that we did identify a project on our ICIP which was related to our open space project, our open space property, and funding to clean that up. There are additional funding sources and projects that could be considered. But the project that we had been considering as part of the review was specifically the open space project, and I think in regard to the funding dates and amounts, Going back to the previous grant awards that we received, so, again, each of these are different agencies, and each of the agencies may have different grant awards with timelines, but the housing projects that we received, and Jordan is here to discuss, but my understanding is the grant award for FY22 was recently submitted, and that award expires in 2030. And then the grant award that we got last week, the deadline on that one is.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Green, good afternoon. Yes, and there may be some changes to the process in the interim between the time we received our first grant award and this new award. But the timelines associated with the first award we received indicated we had 24 months to get a contract in place, but the expenditure date was actually in 2030. So we were looking at a total of about 7 years from 2023 beyond to have the funding fully expended. So I'm not aware if through this new award process there's been adjustments to timelines, or if there's a difference between congressional or directed spending from the Congress side versus the Senate side. There may be some variance there, but just based on our experience, it was some pretty extended timelines on the funding.
Okay, thank you. And then inflation adjusting?
Yeah, I think the projects were reviewed by the agencies, and these were the costs that were identified. I don't know that, again, we can certainly go back to the committees and ensure that the costs that we are requesting are appropriate, but they were reviewed recently as we have submitted them.
And then the road project, is there a way to fund across those, whether it's the open space or the roadway up to Rio and Medio?
I think, and Robert, you can tell me if you disagree, Madam Chair, Commissioner, because of the way that again, it's not a general capital outlay, it has to tie to a specific agency account. I don't know that you would be able to make one request in the hopes that it would spill over. You would actually be, I believe, making a separate request under a different category, which would be transportation, as opposed to the USDA conservation program, which I believe is what had been identified for Rio and Medio. So we'd have to look to see if the road widening project would meet the criteria for the transportation project, but my general sense is that there wouldn't be that opportunity for the spillover, as opposed to if you got money from the state, they could just write it however they wanted to write it to give you that flexibility.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So my experience with this type of funding is that congressional delegation likes projects that they can go and have a photo with. They like to be able to see what we're doing. Congresswoman Teresa Ledger Fernandez came to Camino Jacoba when we were doing the last project of re-roofing and rehabilitating. This kind of spending, this earmark particularly, is a congressionally earmark, and so therefore Congress likes to be able to show off their project. I do think that the radio project is a big ask, but at the same time something that's really important because it is public safety, and especially I'm wondering if we have any other agency asking for that money. Is the city able to ask for this earmark money also, and are they asking for money from the congressional delegation for the radio system?
Madam Chair, yes, they would be eligible. I don't know whether or not they're asking for funding. They're pretty far along in terms of their migration to the statewide public safety radio system, and I believe they have all the funding secured that they need to make that switch.
Okay. And then,
And I could, if I could just add, I could understand, obviously, the rationale for not including the radio project, but because of its importance and because, any amount of funding would help, that's why we brought it forward for your consideration. But obviously, the two other projects are more focused and something that they would be able to feel as if they were funding in total. So I can understand that rationale very much.
I definitely think we should leave it on the list, and, I mean, getting $1 million towards it is, is possible. I mean, they've given us $1.4 million, $1.2 million, so that would, certainly make a dent in moving towards that project. Commissioner Hughes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just along those lines, can we, in the application for the radio project, show what $1 million would get, so that if they can only give us $1 million, can we do, like, can we buy a third of the system, or I don't know, or can we buy a tower? I don't, so that if they only give us $1 million, they can still feel like they bought something significant.
We can certainly look at that to see what we might be able to tease out, and even maybe tailor the request so that it's for a specific component of the overall project. So we could analyze that.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay, Commissioner Hughes?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the 3 projects as presented.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Hughes, a second by Commissioner Hamilton. Any more discussion?
Question, just a point of,
Yes.
I'm just wondering if based on our suggestion, county manager and everybody involved finds a way, decides to tailor the radio project, would that be still within our motion? Like if they find that they can put up just the
Well, I think
tower?
if we show a budget or we show the cost allocations of how it goes down, I think that's,
That would fit within the motion then, yeah.
Or
thanks.
like a phased approach. The first $1 million gets you this, the second $1 million gets you that.
Whatever,
well, I think the
that-
budget would show what you would get for what different elements would cost, and they would then know what they're getting for
Right.
their first $1 million.
Yeah,
Right, and I
Madam
think
Chair,
that
you
was,
answered my-
yeah, I assumed that was sort of part of the motion, that staff was going to try and break that out.
Agreed, thank you, and Madam Chair, thank you, you answered my question.
Yeah. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, congratulations, everybody. So once again, this is International Women's Day. So congratulations to all those women on the board and elected officials who are in the audience and present. 100 years ago, there might not have been women elected officials here. So I think that's moving forward.
Madam Chair, I don't think it was as far away as 100 years, just to say.
That's probably true. Maybe 100, maybe 50. But anyhow, with that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Green, second by Commissioner Bustamante. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.